one body. The saints and the sinners, the living and the dead, the clergy and the laity, those in heaven and those on earth, all united in the risen Christ. One body. A central article of the Catholic faith now comes to life in the latest monument by Timothy P. Schmalz. The acclaimed Christian artist, Timothy Schmalz, has turned his considerable talent to a monument that can only be described as a celebration of Catholicism. The risen Christ, encircled by more than 100 identifiable saints, spiritual luminaries, and scores of angels. More than a year in the making, One Body is Timothy's greatest accomplishment of his career.
When you first approach the sculpture, what will immediately strike you is the Christ figure, who is depicted with his arms outstretched, kind of similar to a risen Christ, but more a welcoming Christ. And above the Christ figure, the second thing you'll notice is the spherical plane, which is representing heaven. And with this, I've described this by using hundreds and hundreds of angels. And I'd say it's the best way that I could have achieved this. And one of the most amazing things about this level is it's so detailed that from a distance you won't really know exactly what it is. All you'll see is the texture. Once you get closer up to the piece, you'll notice the thousands of angels in the piece. And from this spiritual plane of angels descend two staircases from this level, which are depicted with saints from all different nations, from all historical periods, descending like the Christ out to welcome the viewer of this piece. When I was working on the piece, initially I was concerned with the saints and the spiritual heaven plane. In the back, I did not want to leave bare like so many sculptures you see. I wanted this to truly be a three-dimensional piece. And how I achieved this was by using doves, which are the symbol of the Holy Spirit, descending almost exactly opposite to where the saints are descending down the staircase, to come down to earth in a sense, and then to come up and form the figure of Christ. And where the Holy Spirit or the doves emerge is seen two hands that are the symbols of, or a symbol of God, and or the Father. And there you have the Trinity aspect put in the piece. And all around the sculpture are these spiritual cloud formations, which if you look very closely, you can see these feminine creatures on it. And essentially what I wanted to do is charge every area of this piece with some visual message or visual interest, so the viewer can look at the piece for hours, always kind of discovering new things about the piece.
More than 140 identifiable Catholic saints are present, perhaps the largest number of saints in a single sculpture in the world today.
I have saints like Saint Brendan the Navigator, Saint Patrick stepping on a snake, Saint Katira Tikawitha holding the wooden cross that she prayed with, Saint Veronica with her cloth with Christ's face image in it, Saint Thomas Aquinas brooding with a thought, walking down carrying some books. On this piece here, I wanted as much as possible for all of these saints to be telling a specific story. For instance, Saint Luke, the patron saint of artists, is holding up a painting that I sculpted of the Christ figure, the welcoming Christ figure that's up above. And so when people look at this, they will learn a little bit about these saints, and also they'll see the interaction between them. Edith Stein is depicted holding medallion with her Jewish Star of David on is a symbol of her former faith. On all of these sculptures of the saints, I want to create information as much as possible. In the sculpture, Saint Ursula is depicted with 3 wounds on her chest, opening up her shirt to show 3 holes where actually 3 spears were rumored to have went. Saint George, who's already slayed the dragon, holding the head of the dragon. And a lot of these sculptures, what I want to do is show some sort of triumph. I have Saint Sebastian walking down the steps, who will be depicted with holes from the arrows that he was martyred with.
Far from being simply an All Saints sculpture, Timothy has included other spiritual greats, living and dead, including Pope John Paul II, Mother Teresa, Dorothy Day, the contemporary Catholic philosopher René Girard, and Maximilian Kolbe, the Franciscan saint from Poland who was executed at Auschwitz. The diversity of people itself represents the universal call to holiness that was articulated in Vatican II.
With this sculpture, I had to do it, simply because I believe that the Catholic Church needs to see images like this today. It needs to see sculptures that show this rich history of 2,000 years of Christianity. It needs to see, it needs to have these messages out. Art is an extremely strong way of communicating ideas and preserving them. Sculpture specifically has an impact on people. It states a message out there. And when I thought of this piece being here in North America, depicted outside churches, when people would approach and they would look at it, it would demand them to perceive Christianity in a different way than so many times it's connotated in our society. When someone walks by the sculpture, they're forced to see the whole history of the Catholic Church. And with my skills as an artist, I've achieved something that even a secular person, even an atheist or an agnostic will look and want to learn about the sculpture. And in learning about the sculpture, they're going to learn about Catholicism.
Last year, after a pilgrimage to Italy to study in person the works of Michelangelo, Bernini, and Da Vinci, Timothy sought to create an epic monument reminiscent of the masterpieces commissioned by the Church in past centuries. While inspired by Renaissance pieces, Timothy sought to communicate the face of the Church today, with various races and ethnic cultures depicted.
Why can't North America have the most beautiful art pieces as Italy did 500 years ago?
One Body also reflects modern history, including the Holocaust, the birth of nations like the United States and Canada, and the Church's emergence in Asia, Africa, and Native America.
The sculpture One Body includes saints from all different nationalities. It enforces the idea that it is the universal church. The sculpture brings contemporary people, people that didn't live your most pure angelical life, but had possibly a conversion or had a deep faith. It depicts all the saints from a variety of different geographic regions as well as from backgrounds.
Also designed to be an interactive piece, One Body is not complete until the viewer approaches it, since we too are members of the One Body. The style of the piece is contemporary and timeless, a symbol of a faith united over 20 centuries.
I've lived with this piece similar to how a monk lives in a monastery. And what I've gained from that is a spiritual understanding. With the company of the saints I've been sculpting. Many times I've prayed repetitiously as I was working on these pieces. And so how I perceive the sculpture right now, like most of the sculptures I do, but especially this one, is it is almost like a monk with a rosary, but instead of just touching it, a rosary, I would be applying piece by piece of clay on this piece. So I like to consider the whole piece as almost a construction or a result of a prayer, in a sense, is a prayer that is permanent. And so that's why when I'm working, at best it becomes prayer, and at worst it just becomes work. But I try to make it the most as a form of spiritual practice while I'm working on the piece. And this sculpture shows the zenith of my capabilities as an artist. And I've sacrificed my life to become an artist. I realized that I am just a servant to other things. I realize that I'm just an instrument to sculpture, which again is just an instrument to something else, which I believe is to glorify God.
One Body, the greatest work to date by the most popular Christian artist of modern times.
I believe that the sculpture, once it's out, will be a great message for people, that the piece will say, oh yes, the Catholic Church today is still as powerful as it was 1,000 years back, and we are going forward.